Hello students. Today we'll start with the story Salvatore by W. Somerset Maugham. Now this is a beautiful short story talking about a boy called Salvatore. He's the protagonist of the story. His characteristics, the kind of personality he has, and what kind of a person he is. This story very beautifully describes that through all the incidents and episodes in his life. So, Salvatore by W. Somerset Maugham. Let's look at the story now. So, if you see the writer, W. Somerset Maugham, begins the story by saying, I wonder if I can do it. Now, he's attempting to do something, and he is very candidly, very honestly telling the readers that he's going to attempt it, but he doesn't know if he's going to be successful in doing that. So, let's see what is it that he's trying to do. So he begins his narration by saying, I knew Salvatore first when he was a boy of 15 with a pleasant face, a laughing mouth, and a carefree eyes. So this is the description of his appearance, Salvatore. So we know that this writer, who is a third person narrator in the story because he's not going to be involved anywhere in the story, yet he knows Salvatore personally because he says, I knew Salvatore. So he knew him from the time when the boy was just 15. So very clearly the writer knows him for a long time, right? And he knows him so well that he can talk to us, talk to the readers, describe Salvatore to the readers. You will see that the lines that are highlighted in blue are the ones that are important quotes. These are the quotes you can use in your answers to prove and justify things about Salvatore. So this description of Salvatore, which says he was a boy of 15 with a pleasant face, laughing mouth, and carefree eyes, is about the description about his physical appearance. Whenever you're describing a character, physical appearance plays a very important a very important role. So please keep a note of this. He used to spend the morning lying about the beach with next to nothing on, and his brown body was as thin as a rail. He was full of grace. He was in and out of the sea all the time, swimming with the clumsy, effortless stroke common to the fisher boat. It refers to the fisher boys here, right? So he was one of the fisher boys born in that community. So for him, swimming was an integral part of his daily activities. Yes, he was full of grace and he would swim in and out of the sea. He would swim with effortless strokes. So from a very young age, he's been used to this part of swimming in the sea, and that's why he comfortably, effortlessly, he is doing it. Scrambling up the jagged rocks on his hard feet, for except on Sundays, he never wore shoes. He would throw himself into the deep water with a scream of delight. His father was a fisherman who owned his own little vineyard, and Salvatore acted as a nursemaid to his two younger brothers. So we see that he belongs to this little town where he has lived a life which is full of hardships. So scrambling up the jagged rocks here refers to the pointed rocks with sharp edges. Okay, so he would rarely wear shoes except on Sundays when probably he would visit the church. Otherwise, he would usually roam about without wearing shoes, would swim in the deep water, and would always spend his time with delight. We know his father's a fisherman and he owned a little vineyard. Okay, Salvatore acted as a nursemaid. This is an important line, an important quote, which tells us that he is a responsible brother, right? He looked after his brothers, okay, when his parents were not around or when his parents were busy working. He was the one who would take care of his brothers. So from a very young age, he has taken up the responsibility. He shouted to them to come inshore when they ventured out too far and made them dress when it was time to climb the hot vine-clad hill for the frugal midday meal, for the very sparse midday meal, where for a very simple midday meal, he would feed his brothers, he would look after them, and he would be a nursemaid to his brothers. Okay, so this shows a very important part of his personality, which is that he's a responsible brother. But the boys in those southern parts grew apace very quickly. And in a little while, he was madly in love with a pretty girl who lived on the Grand Marina. She had eyes like forest pools and held herself like a daughter of the Caesars. Caesars here refers to the royal family, the family of the rulers, Julius Caesar and family. So she behaved as if she was the daughter of the Caesars. They were affianced, but they could not marry till Salvatore had done his military service and when he left the island, which he had never left in his life before. So, as a boy, he fell in love, he was affianced, he was engaged to this girl, but before they could get married, it was compulsory for him to serve in the military. And he left the town, he left the island for the first time in his life. So we know that he was a very homely boy. He was always lived at home with his parents, with his family, but it's the first time he's going to be away, right? And he goes there to become a sailor in the navy of King Victor Emmanuel. He wept like a child. So he was this little, he was still innocent. Yes, he wept like a child, shows his innocence when he's parting from his family. It was hard for one it was hard for one who had never been less free than the birds to be at the beck and call of others. He was a free spirited boy, but now he had to serve in the army, in the navy, and he had to follow orders. It was harder still to live in a battleship with strangers instead of in a little white cottage among the vines. And when he was ashore, to walk in noisy, friendless cities with streets so crowded that he was frightened to cross them, when he had been used to the silent paths and the mountains and the sea. So here he has lived his life in a beautiful, picturesque island, and to be away from that beauty, to live in strange cities, friendless cities, to live a life where people would order him was very difficult for him. So these are the hardships that he is facing in his life. And then it is talking about how he would be spending his time when he was back home, look at the evenings, looking at the sunset. To see, he lived in a place called Ischia is an island town, and he would spend his time in the evening looking at the sea, the beautiful mountain which was seen from from the beach side, which is called Mount Vesuvius, which looked pearly in the dawn, had anything to do with him at all. So he had never realized how integral these sites were to his life. So when he lived there day in and day out, he never realized that he's going to miss it so much. But now that he's away from it, now that he's missing all this, he cannot see the beauty of the sea, of the beach, of the mountain. He actually realizes that these were a very strong and integral part of his life. He recalls the sight of Mount Vesuvius, which looked pearly in the dawn, and he realized that when he was at, at his home, when he was on the island, it didn't matter to him, but now it matters to him. So, but when he ceased to have them, when it stopped, when now he cannot see them before his eyes, he realized in some dim fashion that they were as much part of him as his hands and his feet. They were as important to him as his hand and feet. They were as if they were a part of his body. He was dreadfully homesick. Very important to note down that he was such a homely guy. He was such a boy that he missed home, he missed his family, he missed his town, and that's why he was terribly, dreadfully homesick. But it was hardest of all to be parted from the girl he loved with all his passionate young heart. So he's a passionate lover, and the most difficult part of being away was that of being away from this girl he loved so much. He wrote to her in his childlike handwriting, again, a proof of his innocence. Long, ill spelled letters in which he told her how constantly he thought of her and how much he longed to be back. He was sent here and there to Spezia, to Venice, to Bern, and finally to China, where he fell ill of some mysterious ailment and that kept him in a hospital for months. Again, another example of another hardship at a very young age. He bore it with the mute and uncomprehending patience of a dog. So it is here, it's comparing him to a dog. He patiently was bearing all the pain, all the discomfort and hardships that he was facing due to this pain and being away from his family in the time of ailment, in the time of sickness. Yes, like a dog, he was suffering. So this comparison is made to show us the kind of patience and suffering that he is going through. When he learned that it was a form of rheumatism, rheumatism is an ailment, a sickness where it causes inflammation of the limbs and joints, and it causes extreme acute pain in the joints. So it's a disease that also causes stiffness and pain in the muscles and swelling and inflammation in the muscles and joints. It is extremely painful. So it made him unfit for further service, and in his heart he exulted. Exulted means he was extremely happy, because this was a chance for him to go back home. For he could go home, and he did not bother. He did not worry about his illness. He was simply thrilled that he could go back home. In fact, he scarcely listened when the doctors told him that he would never again be quite well. So this was a lifelong ailment, and it's a hardship that he's going to face for his entire life. But at that moment, it did not matter to him, because he was only thinking about going back to that little island which he loved so well, and the girl who was waiting for him. When he got into the rowing boat that met the steamer from Naples and was rowed ashore, he saw his father and mother standing on the jetty, and his two brothers, big boys now, which means that it has been quite some time that he was away. Okay, the young boys, young brothers have grown up. So he meets his parents at the jetty. Jetty is like a long structure that is built out into water and is used as a place to get off and on to the boats. So he meets his parents and his brothers there, and he waved to them. His eyes searched among the crowd and waited there for the girl. He could not see her. There was a great deal of kissing when he jumped up the steps, and they all, emotional creatures, cried a little when they exchanged their greetings. He asked where the girl was, so something very unusual. The girl he loves was not there to welcome him. His mother told him that she did not know. They had not seen her for 2 or 3 weeks. So in the evening, when the moon was shining over the placid sea and the lights of Naples twinkled in the distance, he walked down to the Grand Marina to her house. She was sitting on the doorstep with her mother. He was a little shy because he had not seen her for so long. He asked her if she had not received the letters. So he's disappointed that why did she not reply? Why did she not come to welcome him when he had mentioned that in his letters? Yes, they had received a letter, and they had been told by another of the island boys that he was ill. So before he reached the island, the news of him being ill had reached the girl. Yes, that was why he was back. Was it not a piece of luck? For him, it was fortunate that he was back. Oh, but they had heard that he would never be quite well again. The doctor talked a lot of nonsense, but he knew very well that now he was home again, he would recover. So he was very hopeful. See his optimism through this. So another thing that we get to know of his personality is not just his patience, but also his optimism, also his cheerful nature. He thinks that he's going to recover once he's home with his loved ones. They were silent for a little. So the girl and his mother, they were silent. And then the mother nudged the girl. She did not try to soften the blow. So she was not trying to make it less painful for him. She is going to disclose some news that was going to cause him harm. She told him straight out, with the blunt directness of her race, that she could not marry a man who would never be strong enough to work like a man. Another blow to him, another struggle, another hardship. They had made up their minds, her mother and father and she, and her father would never give consent, permission. When Salvatore went home, he found that they all knew. The girl's father had been there to tell them what they had decided, but they had lacked the courage to tell him themselves. So Salvatore's parents could not do that themselves, so they asked him to go and meet her. He wept on his mother's bosom. So, like a child, like an innocent boy, he starts weeping. He was terribly unhappy, but He did not blame the girl. Look at his goodness. He is the symbol, epitome of goodness, extremely unhappy, yet he does not blame her. So, this is rare. This quality is beautiful and rare. A fisherman's life is hard and it needs strength and endurance. He knew very well that a girl could not afford to marry a man who might not be able to support her. His smile was very sad, and his eyes had the look of a dog that has been beaten. But he did not complain, and he never said a hard word of the girl he had loved so well. Another quality that we know about Salvatore from this quote, from these lines, is that he was dedicated and loyal. He was loyal to his love. He was loyal to the girl he loved, and that's the reason he never says anything bad about it. Instead, he tries to understand the girl, he tries to empathize, and he tries to forgive her without saying an ill word about the girl. So we know that Salvatore was a responsible brother, a loving boy, a family oriented boy, patient, optimistic, cheerful, passionate, also dedicated and loyal. These are some adjectives that you should note down and use it in your answers. Then, a few months later, when he had settled down to the common round, working in his father's vineyard and fishing, his mother told him that there was a young woman in the village who was willing to marry him. Her name was Asunta. She's as ugly as the devil, he said. So very impromptu, very quickly he was reacting, and he said, oh, she's not good looking. See, now this was a spontaneous reaction. It is not how Salvatore is. He usually doesn't speak ill about anybody, but this was just spontaneously came out of his mind. She was mouth came out of his mouth. She was older than he, 24 or 25, and she had been engaged to a man who, while doing his military service, had been killed in Africa. She had a little money of her own, and if Salvatore married her, she could buy him a boat of his own, and they could take a vineyard that by happy chance happened at that moment to be without a tenant. His mother told him that Asunta had seen him at the fiesta. Festa or fiesta is a celebration where people get together, and she had seen him there and had fallen in love with him. Salvatore smiled his sweet smile and said he would think about it. On the following Sunday, dressed in the stiff black clothes in which he looked so much less well than in the ragged shirt and trousers of every day, he went up to the high mass at the parish church and placed himself so that he could have a good look at the young woman. When he came down again, he told his mother that he was willing. So we need to see here that Asunta is not bothered about his illness. She wants to marry him nevertheless, and Salvatore too agrees to marry him. Again, he's accepting. He's an accepting person, and he accepts this proposal and is ready to face life and marry this woman. Well, then they were married and they settled down in the tiny whitewashed house in the middle of a handsome vineyard. Salvatore was now a great big husky fellow, tall and broad, but still with that ingenuous smile, very innocent smile, and those trusting, kindly eyes that he had as a boy. So his qualities are undisturbed. Even if he has faced so many struggles and hardships in life, he does not stop it does not stop him from being innocent, trusting, and kind. He had the most beautiful manners I have ever seen in my life. This is the author's personal experience with him. Asunta was a grim visaged female, grim looking, a very grim face, very grim complexion, dark and gloomy features, with decided features, with very hard features, and she looked old for her years. But she had a good heart and she was no fool. She was a very smart woman to settle herself down with a man, also to uh, provide for a man and the family. I used to be amused by the little smile of devotion that she gave her husband. She was also a devoted wife. When he was being very masculine and masterful, she never ceased to be touched by his gentle sweetness. So Asunta valued her husband, but she could not bear the girl who had thrown him over. So she was very bitter towards this girl who had rejected Salvatore. And notwithstanding Salvatore's smiling expostulations, she had nothing but harsh words for her presently children were born to her. So Salvatore was never bitter towards that girl, and in fact he revolted. Expostulations meaning he very nicely revolted when Sunta was harsh or was bitter towards the girl, or when she sort of spoke bad about the girl. But he never spoke bad about her, and soon they had children. It was a hard enough life all through the fishing season. Towards evening, he set out in his boat with one of his brothers for the fishing grounds. It was a long pull of 6 or 7 miles, and he spent his night catching the profitable cuttlefish. Then there was the long row back again in order to sell the catch in time for it to go on in the early boat to Naples. At other times, he was working in this vineyard from dawn till the heat drove him to rest, and then again when it was a trifle cooler till dusk. Often his rheumatism prevented him from doing anything at all, and then he would lie about the beach smoking cigarettes, with a pleasant word for everyone, notwithstanding the pain that racked his limbs. The foreigners who came down to bathe and saw him there said that these Italian fishermen were lazy devils. So look at the hardships he is facing in his life. He's working very hard throughout the day on his vineyard and at night to fish, in spite of all the pain and rheumatism. This is again another example of hardships and struggles that he is facing in his life. So note down all these hardships, because this will help you analyze his character better. So people who did not know him, like foreigners who would stroll about the beach, would say, oh, these are lazy fishermen. But they did not know how hardworking he was. Yet, in spite of all this hard work, the pain, he never spoke bad about anyone. He always had a pleasant word, even if he was undergoing extreme pain that almost racked his limbs. Racked means tortured his limbs. So these are some things to remember about Salvatore. Sometimes he used to bring his children down to give them a bath. They were both boys. At this time, the elder was 3 and the younger less than 2. They sprawled about at the water's edge, stark naked, and Salvatore, standing on a rock, would dip them in the water. The elder one bore it with stoicism, but the baby screamed lustily. Salvatore had enormous hands, like legs of mutton, coarse and hard from the constant toil. But when he bathed his children, holding them so tenderly, drying them with delicate care, upon my word, they were like flowers. They were so beautiful and fragile, like flowers. He would seat the naked baby on the palms of his hand and holding him up high, laughing a little at his smallness, and his laugh was like that laughter of an angel. His eyes then were as candid as his child's. So, again, these few important lines tell us about how affectionate, how responsible, and how caring he was as a father, and his eyes that were like still like a child full of innocence. These are adding to Salvatore's personality. So, please note that down. Then the author continues what he had started in the beginning of the story. He says, I started by saying that I wondered if I could do it. And now I must tell you what is it that I have tried to do. I wanted to see whether I could hold your attention for a few pages while I drew for you the portrait of a man, just an ordinary fisherman, who possessed nothing in the world except a quality which is the rarest, the most precious, and the loveliest that anyone can have. Heavens only know why he should so strangely and unexpectedly have possessed it. All I know is that it shone in him with radiance that, if it had not been unconscious and so humble, would have been to the common run of men hardly bearable. And in case you have not guessed what the quality was, I will tell you: goodness, just goodness. So the author, when he said in the beginning that he's trying to do something, what is it that he's trying to do? He's trying to portray, to present a quality of goodness that this man has, Salvatore, which is very rare, because people who go through hardships and struggle are often bitter. They turn bitter because of all the struggles that they are facing, but Salvatore did not. And that is why this quality was rare, which was precious and was lovely. And it is unexpected that a man of his type who is going through these hardships will ever possess it. It was not common, but it was shining bright and radiantly from this man, from Salvatore. And that is, and it was unconscious. He did not consciously do it. It was inherent in him. It came out very unconsciously to him. That is why it was humble. People who try and attempt to be very good, they are not humble. They are attempting, they are trying. But to him, it was something very natural. It came out to him very naturally, and that is why he was very humble. And this goodness is something which is rare, which was shining out of him and made him radiant. So this is the explanation of the story. We will analyze the other elements of the story in different parts of the videos. In the next part of the video, we'll analyze the different elements of the story, which is the setting, the plot, the theme, the style, etc. But let us remember Salvatore for his goodness, and let us appreciate the author for giving us a very vivid character sketch, biographical sketch of this protagonist, Salvatore. In the next video, we will analyze the story. Thank you, students.